Danzig.
And I'm Hannah Hampton, and you're listening to HR After Hours.
Well, hello, and welcome to HR After Hours podcast, the only HR podcast to be the subject of a porn parody. Hannah Hampton, my sister from another mister, the missing taste to my fruit striped gum. How the heck are you doing today?
I am great. I'm sorry, that was hilarious, and I was not expecting that. We don't practice these, so I'm doing great. That I will think about that all day long.
Well,
How are you?
Good. So, what I like is every once in a while, you and I need to take a break. So I thought
too.
this would be a great time for a little R&R, and let's have a best of HR After Hours podcast. So here you go.
Speaking of which, let's just get the ball rolling. I think you have a story that we couldn't help but not miss over the last few days.
Yeah, everyone, I think, is aware of this happening, but in the recent news, as in the month of November 2019, McDonald's had to part ways with their CEO due to a consensual relationship. And I thought, this is a good topic and reminder for all HR folks. I think it's a timely topic, and it's good to really think about how relationships affect work and what a nice policy in place will do to protect you. But, before we get into relationships at work, another kind of update to the story is the chief people officer has left as well. I don't have any details. The article I read on that one, I don't have any details on that, but I thought it's an interesting leadership shakeup at the huge company of McDonald's. So that's a lot going on for McDonald's this time of year, I guess.
Yeah, I recently had to separate ways with McDonald's because of my waistline. I decided that I no longer wanted to wear elastic pants, so I could get under 300 lbs. I had to say goodbye to the McRib and the quarter pounder with cheese and the shakes. And oh man, McDonald's, I haven't had in a long time, but how about those McFlurries? The good thing those machines never work though, right?
Definitely. Well, let's get back to the story. So
already you've had to reel me in. I'm so glad you're here today.
Look at that. So the chief executive officer's name is Steve Easterbrook, and he's been in that position since 2015 is what the article is telling me. But this individual is I think divorced or not married. So this was a consensual relationship. So I think it's important to think of, to talk about that piece of it. It wasn't, it wasn't a tawdry affair or anything like that, but it was a consensual relationship. However, that was a violation of their company policy. I myself don't know, what their policy is, but I have worked in many a company that has a policy around dating at work. And I think it's important to discuss rules around that, because let's get real. You and I were talking about how busy we are this week. We all spend so much time at work. It's pretty easy to catch feelings for a fellow employee and maybe start a relationship. I know people whose relationships have started at work. I mean, heck, I think a really good example is Bill and Melinda Gates. They met at work, and now they do a lot out in the world. So, it's important to talk about, again, policies around this, not necessarily just prohibiting it, but having a strong policy behind relationships.
Any policy you have, as long as everyone put time, energy, effort, logic, thought, and the proper processes to put a policy into place, the policy is the policy. Someone decided, or multiple people decided, that this was the right thing to do because of the way it could impact business, right. Or, especially, let's talk about McDonald's. I mean, you're talking about one of the most public businesses in the U.S., something that's used as a barometer to constantly evaluate the QSR segment of the restaurant industry, and just even the industry as a whole and how things are changing. And McDonald's was at risk financially when we realized, hey, Millennials don't want just a cheap dollar burger. And that's where the dollar menu did not work even on the relaunch when they tried to revamp it. So McDonald's is a company that's constantly being used as a barometer for what's going on as in the United States, whether we like it or not. I don't think McDonald's wouldn't represent me, but let's be honest, it represents the U.S. in a lot of different ways as far as the labor force, technology, the economy. Conversation, as far as I'm concerned, really isn't about relationships at work. You know, you and I both agree on that. He is Mayor McCheese, and he broke his own law. That's it.
He resigned. Basically, the story goes it was brought to the attention of the board. They did an investigation, and the CEO, he resigned, and he wrote a letter to the employees stating, "I made a mistake." And he agreed, basically, you know, I'm not going to do it verbatim, but given the values of the company, he stated he agreed with the decision and decided it was time for him to move on. To me, that was the absolute right thing to do, was to admit, I made a mistake, I violated a policy, and I'm moving on. While I think people were a little concerned about how this would affect stock prices, it was the right thing to do as the leader of the company. You have to lead by example. And if the company was expecting other people to follow this rule, the CEO has to follow it as well.
You know, we can't have a district attorney that isn't held accountable for the same laws as the rest of the citizens. How could they enforce any policies with the company moving forward if they didn't act this way? I haven't read as much as you have, but I do find it interesting that they did cite the investigation. It was decided that he should leave, and he, you know, bowed out gracefully. I played soccer, right? And then I played tennis. Two sports that when you make the error, you raise your hand, you call it. Sounds like he didn't quite go that route, but maybe if I read more articles, I would find that he really did. But he didn't fight it, which in this day and age, we see that all the time where people are like, no, you can't force me out. Look what I've done for the company. I mean, this is a very black and white rule from what I've read. He violated it. He had to just say, yeah, you guys got me. I can't. I don't think they really had a choice at all here.
Right. And I'm very curious and I'm sure if I did some digging on the internet, I might be able to find McDonald's handbook, but I'd be curious as to what their policy looks like, because I've worked at, I've had multiple jobs, and I've seen multiple policies around relationships in the workplace. And, it can go as strongly as to prohibiting them, which I don't agree with, because I feel that that's a little too strong, to, saying, yes, you can have relationships, but talking about different levels of reporting or being at the same level. And then there's also companies that do the quote unquote love contract, where it's like, okay, you can have a relationship. However, the company does not want to have any, doesn't want to worry about any lawsuits or have anything that they could be responsible for. So we'll have employees sign a love contract. So do you have any experience with this policy, or any examples of dating in the workplace that you've experienced?
All right. So I'm not writing things down, so I'm going to talk quickly, because you know that my attention span is fleeting. First and foremost, I did not see the actual printed policy, but I did read that McDonald's forbids managers from having romantic relationships with direct or indirect reports. And so in his case, being the CEO, pretty much everyone's a direct or indirect report. Absolutely. So he could not dip his toe in the McDonald's staffing pool at all. So that's how I read that it just forbids managers from having romantic relationships with direct or indirect reports. The quote unquote love contract, I have never had proper exposure to that. So I've never worked for a company that utilized it that I was aware of. As far as work relationships, we may or may have not mentioned this in a previous podcast, but the current Mrs. Danzig was in fact, not only did we work together, but she actually did report to me.
Ooh, scandalous.
So it was actually, I was suspended.
Oh.
And she agreed to resign so we could continue dating. We were relatively new into the relationship. I
Mhm.
hadn't been divorced that long. And so, because we were violating a company policy, we were forced to make a decision very quickly. Do we want to shake hands and say, sorry, but my career is more important to me? Or did we want to actually, for her to leave over a relationship with me, I had to pretty much say, yes, I think we're going somewhere.
That's interesting. So she
Isn't it though?
reported to you, and she's the one who left. Was that her thought? Was that her idea, or was that the company's?
We were basically told that if we were going to continue to be in a relationship, we couldn't work together. And
So
then
somebody had to leave.
someone had to leave.
Because what surprises me is that since she reported to you and she left, I'd be worried about her coming back and suing and say, "Hey, I was unfairly terminated because not only the person I reported to was in my relationship, and there's always that risk of, well, I did feel like I could say no, and then all of a sudden I lost my job to it. So how did that all work out?"
Well, without going into too much detail, this was a smaller company where I was overseeing multiple facets of it, and there just happened not to be an official buffer between us, but
Mhm.
it wasn't like we were working together constantly side by side on a daily basis. But this was a while ago, and honestly, if this same situation were to take place today, I would imagine it would be handled a little differently.
Interesting.
Plus, it helps when your dad owns the company. So, next topic. So,
Well, maybe
tell
we'll
me
save that
about
for another
any
day.
incidences you have had. She listens to this every once in a while, so we really need to keep this moving. But it was the best decision she ever made in her life.
Well,
I'm
yes,
in
I feel
so much trouble.
yes. Well,
And this,
I know that you both are in great careers and fulfilled, so I do feel like all's well that ends well in this scenario.
in this scenario, it was probably the exception to the rule that
Right.
that the setup happened to work. But what about these quote unquote love contracts? I mean, have you had any direct exposure to them?
I've not. I did at one point ask somebody to write a letter stating that they were in a consensual relationship because a similar thing happened where somebody was dating their manager, and we ended up having to transfer. I believe we transferred the manager to a different location, and then we had them write out letters stating that they were in a consensual relationship. And I don't remember the details, but that is, I want to say, the only time I've ever dealt with a somewhat love contract, but never a formal, like, here is the contract, I'm going to have both parties sign. That's something that I've heard of, I've seen, especially in TV shows, but I've never actually directly experienced it. Now, I have worked at companies that have had policies around dating, and it's more prohibiting the employee from dating somebody who they report to. But here's the thing that's different than the McDonald's scenario is that I've seen it where if you are indirectly reporting to somebody, there has to be a number of levels in between you so that there is no concern about favoritism and things of that sort. So I've seen it where, okay, we understand that you might date in the workplace. You can't date somebody who reports to you or you report to. And again, explaining the different levels of reporting and then how to handle it. Please disclose to your HR partner and everything else that goes along with that. But I have to say, I feel like that these relationships happen more regularly than not. And I've worked at multiple companies where there are people that are married that might be working in different locations, and they obviously met at work. They stated they met when they were together. So it happens, and I feel like as a company we just need to understand that it's going to happen, and you just need to be prepared to deal with it, and that's why you have a policy in place that handles it.
I agree. And I know you're so much more of a stickler for details than I am. At the end of the day, it comes down to this. We are protecting our people and a brand,
Yeah.
and you and I have had that conversation about the rules and the purpose of HR. I think there should be a perfect level relationship between those two. Some companies, it's your role is more about protecting the brand. Some companies, it's more about protecting the people, which in return protects the brand, which I think is very smart. You have to have just very clear, concise policies for the reason that if this gentleman's relationship went south with the team member, and I have not seen anything about this individual's title, role, or anything.
They haven't released that.
Okay, if and when the relationship goes south, because typically they do at some point, how much damage could the other person do to the company? And if you're the CEO in a relationship with a subordinate, which everyone's your subordinate for the most part, no, it's near impossible. I'm not going to say nobody. I've learned not to speak in extremes, but it is so difficult and near impossible not to discuss work with your significant other if you both work for the same company, that it would have to be just such a bizarre relationship to be that one example where you can say, no, sorry, we cannot discuss anything to do with business in our personal lives. I mean, you're just putting the company at risk. If you wrong them in some way, whether it's accurate or not, they may feel like you've damaged their career and they're going to possibly seek damages, financial reciprocation for what they've been through, because they're more than likely going to leave the company, blah, blah, blah. So it just doesn't work when you're that high up. But I mean, what are your thoughts?
No, I totally agree with you. And what I'm taking away from this is just the importance of, setting clear expectations of what your relationship policy is and what you expect, how you expect your people to act. And how could the CEO have avoided this? I'm not saying that, just ignore all of your feelings, but I don't think there was a way for him to win in this scenario, because say he's interested in having a relationship with somebody who he works with. Well, what if they had a conversation? Hey, I want to pursue this. Oh, but one of us can't work here. It still, I feel like, would violate the policy if the policy states that you cannot have a relationship with a direct or indirect report. So to me, it's kind of mind-boggling on how this could have ended up any differently, other than the complete, him prohibiting having feelings for somebody. But ultimately, I think it's really important to have a very clearly stated policy around relationships in the workplace.
And as you look further up the corporate ladder, I mean, the further you get up, you thin yourself from the herd, so to speak, right? A CEO is not going to have the same social life activities that the general manager of the location in Danville, Illinois is, more than likely. I mean, there's always the exceptions to the rules, right? So when you get to that level, you don't dip your pen in the company ink. I mean, to me, there's certain level of professionalism, and where you are, the shining beacon and example of what represents the company and the brand, that it's almost like being a politician. I mean, you have to make sure that your skeletons stay in your closet at home and they don't make it into the executive suite. There's just a different level of expectation when you get to those top positions that you just have to commit yourself to. To me, he kind of made a really almost rookie mistake with doing that. We don't have all the info, so we don't know exactly where on the totem pole this individual lies that he had this relationship. And let's stress consensual relationship. But the rules are the rules there. And when you take home those big giant paychecks and you're attending those board meetings and you're being the shining example of the brand, and you've got to basically be near perfect, it kind of speaks for itself. But where it does come more into the HR department, as far as making sure everyone agrees on those policies, is just overall, making sure you have a very clear, concise policy that is, wait for it, consistently and fairly executed and enforced by leadership.
On a last note, the CEO is receiving a severance package. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a decent sized severance package. An article I read said that he had received in total compensation last year, $15.9 million. So I'm sure his severance was pretty sizable, and I don't think he's going to be hurting for money. However, I think it'll be interesting to see what his next career step's going to be.
I think he's going to be just fine. I think he's an example of someone that probably should lay low for a little bit, travel, play some golf or tennis or whatever he does. And then I would imagine there are quite a few companies that already are trying to put on their timeline when they're going to recruit him in 2020.
Certainly.
So I don't think this is going to damage his long-term career as long as he stays quiet, as long as the other party involved doesn't come up in the press and start saying negative things about the relationship and we find out that it was in fact consensual. I think everything will be fine. But it's just one of those where you just have to say, hey, my bad. I got caught. I know the rules. Fair is fair. I'm not any better than anyone else in the company. I'm not exempt from the rules. Rules are what keeps the world in place. And I wish everyone the best of luck. And I think if he plays it that way, he'll be just fine. So another quick dating in the workplace story that I forgot about. My parents, true story, actually met at work. I did not find this out till later. My mother knew that my dad was interested in her, but in fact that he would never violate his company policy of dating subordinates. And so she, without him asking, found another position with a different company. They got together shortly thereafter. So there's another one where apparently in my family, the women are the martyrs for relationships.
Oh, that's funny. Well, there you go. There's another example. Well, any other final comments on this story? I feel like I've said everything I wanted to say. Any other comments or even family stories?
No more family stories. Absolutely not. Thank God my parents aren't supportive and don't listen to the podcast at all. That's not true. Love you, Mom and Dad. But no, I think this one, unless something comes out a little hinky, I think this was kind of a no-brainer. I don't think anyone's, going, oh, he's a victim here. So I think Steve Easterbrook will be just fine. And that means you and I can get back to work.